So let me just jump right to it. Today, we have the pleasure of having Nicole Nelson present to us. I think is still the executive director of the Alaska Legal Services Corporation, the Alaska LSC, which is Alaska's only statewide provider of free civil legal assistance to low-income Alaskans. She's been executive director there for 13 years, and before that, as a staff attorney and supervising attorney for nearly 12 years. Nicole, I'll note that they seem to be dating you by giving these specific numbers, but nonetheless, you have overseen 12 offices, 6 medical legal partnership locations, and a 60-plus member staff, and have been recognized as being the, I think, person in charge of the Alaska Legal Services Commission's unique medical legal partnership model, which was recognized as one of the 5 most promising practices worldwide for increasing access to justice at the 2019 World Justice Forum. Congratulations on that. And recently, she was selected as the founding CEO for Frontline Justice. And we will hear a little bit more from Nicole after this presentation on that, as that, I think, impacts all of our access to justice work here in New Mexico and is an exciting opportunity. And congratulations to you on that, a very unique honor, I think. I think Frontline Justice has a lot to offer, and it's an exciting opportunity. And so with that, Nicole, please fill in any gaps, give us any more information you can as to you, and then we'll just let you get started.
Great. Well, I think we've had enough about me. I'd love to get started, and I'm happy, we can answer some questions, or I'll leave some time for questions at the end. But I love the opportunity to talk about the community justice work that we've been doing in Alaska. And I want to take this time to do 2 things. One is to tell you how we got there, how we reached this point, and then also just to sort of start, and also to talk about a research project. Recently, Alaska Legal Services, over the course of the last year, we were one of 50 projects nationwide that were funded by the NSF to look at, they're called civic opportunities grants. And these, the National Sciences Foundation, they were really looking to marry researchers and practitioners together and look for solutions that communities need, that are widespread across the nation. And so Alaska's Community Justice Worker Program was one of the 50 selected to do a planning grant. And then as part of that, a subset of those 20 were selected for $1 million investment into the idea. And ours was to stand up a Community Justice Worker Resource Center. So we received that, and so that's very exciting. And as part of that project, we needed to develop a video that sort of helped the world understand what our program was, what we were doing, and why it had potential to scale. And so I'd like to just take a minute and play that short video for you all, because I think it gives a lot of context. And then I'll get into more specifically the details about what we're doing in Alaska and how we got to that point as a state. So I'm going to share my screen if that works for you all, and let me know if you if we have any glitches there. Okay. Okay, can you all see my screen?
We can.
Okay, I'm going to start playing this now.
The United States faces a civil access to justice crisis. The most recent national data show us that 92% of low-income Americans cannot access the services they need to address their civil legal needs.
But what's happening in the civil justice system is kind of under the radar. It's a very quiet crisis, even though it's enormous. So if you look at the best information we have about Americans and their civil justice experiences, they have probably 150 million to 250 million new civil justice problems every year. And that's things like being threatened with eviction from your home, not being able to access health care for your kids, not being paid overtime that you're owed by your employer, all kinds of things that can have really significant impacts on people's lives. And as far as we know, most of those justice issues, particularly for poor people, get no assistance of any kind. And the reason for that is not because we don't want to help people who have these really significant issues, but because the systems that we have in place to provide help to those folks are just not big enough for such a gigantic problem.
Alaska is no exception to this crisis. In fact, the very rurality of its populations, and in particular such rural and remote Alaska Native communities, only intensifies the challenges that people face in trying to address such life-altering civil legal issues.
The area that my organization, Alaska Legal Services, covers is the entire state, and Alaska is bigger than the next 3 states combined. That's California, Montana, and Texas. And so to cover that entire area and to provide free civil legal aid, my organization is really the only resource for people who can't afford an attorney.
Current models of civil legal services delivery for low-income and vulnerable Americans, and particularly for those living in rural and remote areas, have failed to respond to this crisis. Yet effective, scalable, and sustainable community-based models for rural services delivery exist in other areas. This includes the transformative impact of embedded, culturally responsive community health workers who provide frontline medical, dental, and behavioral health services.
The access to justice problem is incredible in Alaska. It's similar to the access to health care. There's not community-based legal advocates or workers in those communities or lawyers that are within those communities or members of the communities. The Community Justice Worker program leverages on programs that have developed over the last 50 years to provide that level of services in the communities based on community members, providing the education that's needed to do that, and in a team-based fashion with Alaska Legal Services attorneys supervising and supporting these community justice workers.
During stage 1 of the Civic Innovation Challenge, our civic partners have made significant strides in realizing the opportunity to scale community justice workers in Alaska and beyond. Perhaps most significantly, we obtained a waiver from the Alaska Supreme Court that will allow non-lawyers to provide legal advice and representation, eliminating a key regulatory barrier. Leveraging this waiver, ALSC built and tested a new domestic violence training module and in-person curriculum with an inaugural cohort of community health aides. During this time, our team also met with 18 institutional stakeholders and conducted 28 individual and group interviews with community members in Alaska. This allowed us to solidify key partnerships and build community awareness and interest in the program. Finally, we designed potential models for sustainability, including earned income for community justice workers, cross-subsidization within organizations, and Medicaid reimbursement for health-harming legal needs. Our Stage 1 findings suggest that the community justice worker model is poised for scale and sustainability both within and beyond Alaska. A design workshop that we facilitated with over 50 potential legal aid partners from across the U.S. allowed us to more deeply explore challenges and develop innovative solutions for scaling the community justice worker model. Joe Nelson, co-chair of the Alaska Federation of Natives and the Alaska Legal Services Board Chair, shares this powerful message.
The community justice worker program, though, gives us hope that our communities and people that need access will get that access from peers and that know the place as well as they should. So I hope you too support the community justice worker program in Alaska. And sheesh.
All right, great. Okay, so I hope you all could, were you able to see the video? Fantastic. Okay, so that's the research project that we have been working on. And again, we received a $1 million investment to establish a community justice worker resource center. And over the course of the last year, we have been working in collaboration with partners from the American Bar Foundation, researchers that you saw in the video, to sort of get the bar waiver in place and also to get the funding that is needed to develop the supports for our community justice workers. So now I just want to step back for a second and just talk with you about the process, how we got to this point of where we're ready to launch a community justice worker resource center and achieve the bar waiver that, and the bar waiver allowed Alaska Legal Services, the legal aid program, to it sort of creates a waiver so that the unauthorized practice of law prohibitions are not applicable to our community justice workers. So I'm going to share my screen again, this time with a PowerPoint, and just take you through a little bit of how our state got to what the waiver is, what it looks like, and also how we got to the point of achieving that waiver. And it kind of, I like to think of it as community readiness, how we've got our community to the point where we were able to receive, by the time our waiver went before the Board of Governors of the Alaska Bar Association, we received unanimous approval from our Board of Governors and also unanimous approval from the with the Alaska Supreme Court, save one justice whose only dissent was, I think this should apply more broadly, not just to Alaska Legal Services. And I could not agree more. So let me just take you back a little bit through some how we readied our state for this process. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, let's see. All right, so and I want to say too that we can, I'll take questions after. It's really just a short few slides to get through here. And then we can save the rest of the time for some questions.
Nicole, it's not sharing.
Oh, it's not. Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's see. I think I have to ask to share my screen. That might be the reason why. Okay. Okay, here we go. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay.
Although it is in your, okay, now it went to presentation mode. Yes.
Okay, fantastic. All right. So just a few things I'd like to start with is just sort of some background information about our state. Just so you know, again, we have this enormous space that's bigger than the next 3 states combined. And I think these things are important to understand because as you folks know, I think in New Mexico that every place is different. And so the challenges that we're trying to, when we're addressing justice gaps, we're trying to find, we need to be mindful of the unique circumstances that every community is, the unique challenges and circumstances of the community in which you live. For Alaska, a big part of the work that we do is thinking about the scale, right? We have this enormous space, and then we have a very low population density. Our population, there are 750,000 people in our state, and most of them are located in the city of Anchorage, and the balance are dotted across smaller villages that are not connected to the road system. So if you look at this slide, you will see the orange dots are all of the little villages that are across our state. There are over 300. And where the white line is, it is reflective of where the road system is. So those are the only roads. So 90% of our communities are not road connected. You need to fly into them, or you can take a boat in the river or in the summer, or snow machine sometimes in the winter. But again, most of those are not road connected. And they have very small population density in the villages. They can range from, some villages might have 30 people to a big hub community, a big in our sense of the word, which would be about 6,000 people. But again, most of the population is along the road system in the city of Anchorage. We are also really honored to be home to 229 tribal nations. We have about 40% of the nation's tribes, and we are really lucky to have their influence and guidance and stewardship within our state, and they're very much a part of the fabric of the way in which we do work and the way and the service population. Also, Alaska is incredibly diverse. There are 100 different languages spoken in the Anchorage School District. It is the most diverse community outside of New York, the most diverse urban community outside of New York. So that's another factor in thinking about our service delivery area. Again, this is this shows you an example of one of the smaller communities in which we try to provide services. And you can imagine in this area that there are a lot of barriers to accessing justice in the legal system. We have remoteness, there's extreme weather, low population density, and also there's just really limited infrastructure throughout a lot of our communities that aren't road connected. Most communities don't have any law enforcement presence at all, and they don't have, there's not a local court system or other related services. And of course, attendant with that are broadband shortages. We also struggle with workforce shortages. So when we're talking about folks who you need professional, like highly credentialed folks, there are often shortages of those type of individuals within our very remote and isolated communities. And just by way of background, just a little bit of information about Alaska Legal Services. We have been doing business in Alaska since 1967, almost about the same time as statehood. And we have about 60 staff across 12 different locations and 6 medical legal partnerships. We are located in the hub communities that you'll see there that are in the yellow. And each year we're able to help about, just under 4,000. We help about 3,700 cases, impacting over 8,000 Alaskans. And our clients are served in about 167 communities. Now, a few years ago I think it was around 2016, our community came together under the guidance of the Alaska Supreme Court's Access to Justice Commission. And we wanted to find out, just to sort of understand what people were doing with their unmet legal needs. And as part of that, the Access to Justice Commission did a community needs analysis. And one of the things that they found out when they asked folks, what do you do when you have a legal problem? It turned out that Alaska Legal Services was the most referred to entity in the state. And so we had good name brand value. People trusted us. We were more referred to than the state court system or the Family Law Self-Help Center or any of the other sort of legal attended organizations. But the problem with that is, just like every other legal aid provider in the world, we are having to turn people away, one person for everyone that we are able to accept. And that doesn't really even account for the folks that aren't making it to our doors. So that's something that we were struggling to figure out how we would do that. So another thing that we did during the mapping exercise is we wanted to figure out where the lawyers were in our community. And so if you look at the slide that has the light blue and green circles on it, you can see that's where the lawyers are. And of course, if you remember from the slide going back a little while ago, they're, of course, no surprise to anybody, they're along the road system. And so the private lawyers are where those green bubbles are. And then we have a few smattering of, either legal aid or public defenders who are in the hub communities across the state. But our legal infrastructure, it's missing a lot, right? It's not in a lot of communities. On the other side, where we have the red diamonds, we sought to understand in those communities that didn't have any legal infrastructure or justice infrastructure, what assets were available to them. And we found out that the greatest infrastructure within our state, almost down to the village level, was the Alaska Native Healthcare system, which had community health aides and attendant infrastructure down to almost every single village. And we thought, you know what? Why don't we partner? Why don't we see if we can partner with our healthcare providers to see if we might be able to borrow some of their infrastructure and expand our reach a little bit? So this led us to develop this really unique medical legal partnership called Partnering for Native Health, that was a partnership between the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium and Alaska Pacific University, which is a tribal serving university that is affiliated with Alaska with the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium and helps with their workforce development needs. And this turned out, originally we just really wanted to borrow some of the healthcare systems infrastructure, but it turned out to be really transformative in our way of thinking about how we might actually do a better job of addressing the justice gap. So it turned out that the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium and our healthcare partners had really been addressing some of the same problems we had related to rurality, workforce shortages, and trying to deliver services in remote areas. And they were very further advanced than the legal system was in thinking about how we might meet those needs in a culturally connected and community-based ways. They had the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium has a range of mid-level healthcare practitioners that are community health aides, dental health aides, and behavioral health therapists who are mid-level healthcare practitioners who are drawn from the local communities. They're providing training and oversight and are able to serve community members and address their health needs. When we understood this, we realized that we really wanted to develop a justice workforce that would be the analog to those already community-based service providers. And so we set about working with the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium and Alaska Pacific University to recruit and train a cohort of community justice workers and support them through asynchronous distance learning programs and some hands-on learning. And so we're essentially looking at helpers who are already in the community and providing them some legal training so they can issue spot and so they can address particular legal issues, targeted legal issues, and through a hands-on training program and oversight from Alaska Legal Services staff can serve people within their communities. And so that has been going really well. We have curriculum that addresses SNAP benefits, wills, Indian Child Welfare Act cases, debt collection defense, domestic violence, and unemployment benefits. Our community to date, and this went live, let's see, I think we started the training programs and recruiting folks to come through them around 2021. And so since that time, we have 167 community justice workers who have completed at least one training, and are serving their community. And we have another 159 that are progressing through the training modules and helping folks. So that's a total of about 325 people and growing. We also have another 209 that are not progressing through the program. And again, we needed more resources to figure out why the training programs aren't working for these folks or why they stopped progressing, and to better understand that. And so that's a future work where we will be focusing over the next year, putting more resources in that area to understand how we can help those folks who are not progressing. The folks, our community justice workers generally work for other organizations. So they're volunteers for Alaska Legal Services, but they are generally supported in their day jobs by other nonprofit or community-based organizations. And so you can see this chart sort of breaks it down of where the advocates' reported affiliations are. Most of the numbers are working for a tribal nonprofit organization, social service organizations. There are some that are through healthcare or other social services organizations. And then we also have some law or undergrad students who are also, they're not obviously not BARJET, but they are, helping under the waiver. And you can see just sort of the breakdown along those lines. To date, as of last quarter, the end of September, our community justice workers, we have about 325 community justice workers, as I mentioned. 44.4% of those are Alaska Native. And this is really just an incredible advancement, I think, in our way of delivering services. Alaska Legal Services, although we are governed by a predominantly Alaska Native board, and our clients are predominantly Alaska Native. Over 45% of our clients are Alaska Native. ALSC's staff is less than that, and because there are far fewer Alaska Native attorneys than we might like. Our staff are located in 12 offices. However, now with the recruitment of the CJWs, we have CJWs are located in 38 different communities. So we've got community-based advocates. We've really expanded over the course of the last year our reach in those areas. To date, there are 343 cases open that our CJWs are handling. 305 of those have been closed, and 245 of the cases were assigned in 2023. Currently, our CJWs are supported by one full-time staff member, and to date, they're really taking on low-level, simple legal procedures that have big impact for our client community, but they have achieved 100% success rate in the services they are providing. And if you look at that as compared to ALSC's advocacy staff, who are wonderful, the 45 advocacy people that we have on staff, they are handling approximately 84 cases per year. But if we have this one staff member who's dedicated to supporting the CJWs, they are able to close about 305 cases per year with that, in that same dynamic. So we think it looks like it has the potential to scale. Armed with this information, last year we asked the Supreme Court and the Bar Association for a bar rule change, a waiver that would allow Alaska Legal Services to upskill our community justice workers so they could take on increasingly complex matters that would otherwise step over the line of unauthorized practice of law. And that waiver, as I mentioned before, was approved with unanimous support from the Bar Association and also from our Supreme Court. And so our bar waiver is really simple and it's very flexible. It applies only to Alaska Legal Services. It requires that we train our community justice workers on the roles of professional responsibility and provide supervision as needed. Again, the CJWs practice exclusively for ALSC. We have to give informed consent to our clients. ALSC will put up candidates for approval, and the scope of their practice will be able to evolve with evidence of their competency. So it's simple, it's sweet, and will allow us to be flexible so that we can build a really inclusive support system and number of advocates as possible. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and let's see. Okay. There we go. All right. So I think that's it for my presentation. I'm happy to take questions.
Well, I've got all sorts of questions, but
Sure.
anyone else, please feel free to raise your hand. Nicole, as I'm sure you've been informed, one of the reasons why you're here today is because that's what this group is all about, and that is we are evaluating models around the country for community justice workers, paraprofessional programs, whatever nomenclature you want to use. But the idea is to get people potentially trained to be helping in legal matters in the same way that your community justice workers are. And so one of my primary questions is, what does the oversight consist of? So explain how someone in a far-flung community says, I want to become a community justice worker. What happens at that point?
Sure. So when somebody signs up and they want to be a community justice worker, so the co-director of our Community Justice Worker Resource Center signs them up through a program at Alaska Pacific University. And so as part of the curriculum that we developed and co-designed with distance learning professionals at the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium and Alaska Pacific University, they go through the training program that includes a hands-on practice of helping a client in a particular area. So again, these training modules are meant to be simple and allow people, it takes on average about 8 hours to go through one of the training programs. And then you are assigned an attorney mentor who will help them with the hands-on piece of the program, right? And so that is the supervision. Afterwards, ALSC supervises the work of the community justice workers in the same way that we do our other volunteers, right? So there is oversight through like our pro bono volunteers. They are matched with somebody who's on staff at Alaska Legal Services and who connects both with the client and follows up on what's happening within the case and collecting outcomes and making sure that progress is being made. Our programs, training programs, are designed to identify simple legal procedures that can be handled with very specific and concrete instructions, and that need really some supervision, but it's not high level supervision because we're following the model of the community health aid program, where they have stop orders and procedure checklists that keep the community health aides on track and let them know when they need to seek out for additional, like, higher level support. As we upskill our community justice workers, we envision that, that supervision model will need to change a little bit depending on how complex the legal, depending on the complexity of the legal procedure. So like we like to think of it as depending on the complexity of the legal procedure and the experience of the CJW. But for practical purposes, how we make sure that ALSC is sort of we stand in as the entity and oversee and supervise the CJWs. They're covered by our malpractice insurance, and they, the Bar Association would take any complaints of harm in the way that they supervise us as an entity already.
And Nicole, when you say each CJW is assigned an attorney mentor, is that mentorship by a pro bono attorney in the community?
No, so that mentorship, they're not necessarily, we don't have people there aren't attorneys in many of these communities. So it's remote supervision, right. Which is what happens. I mean, that's how ALSC supervises most of our staff on a daily basis. We've been doing that for 50 something years, remote, providing remote services is just a way of doing business in Alaska.
And so really what I'm asking is, since every worker has an attorney mentor, in other words, that CJW can contact an attorney at any time to be discussing cases that come up, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And do the CJWs go to court? Do they have that ability under your program?
They do under the waiver. We have not upskilled, so the waiver is new. And so we started our training programs so that they were, with really simple legal procedures that were outside the court system in areas where the unauthorized practice of law wouldn't be a challenge. Now that we have the waiver, we're building programs to expand that would allow for CJWs to eventually go to court. And we expect by the end of this year that there will be certain procedures where that will happen, certain legal areas where that will happen. So for instance, eviction and domestic violence protective orders.
Lucy.
Thank you. Again, I apologize for my internet today. I'm curious to know if the community justice workers are the very same, actual physical human beings who are also doing the medical work.
Yes, some of them are. So yeah, so what we did, a lot of these communities, as I mentioned before, are really small. There aren't a lot of people in them. And so there might not be enough work for a full-time community justice worker. And so a lot of the CJWs, most of them are affiliated with other organizations. And so that's where they're able to connect in. Their employers are paying them to take our community justice worker learning modules because it's related to the work that they are performing for other people. So some of them are health aides, some of those work for tribal social service organizations, and so they might be, in the public assistance department of a social service organization. They might be domestic violence, working at a domestic violence shelter, or a faith-based organization that's providing social services. But we're really trying to overlay and infuse legal knowledge in community helpers in places that they already exist and where people are going to find them.
Got it. Thank you.
Anita.
Hi, good morning, Nicole.
Good morning.
Can you explain a little more in detail how you did the community needs analysis? Was that an internal analysis? Did you hire a company to help? How did you go about that?
Yeah, so the Alaska Supreme Court's Access to Justice Commission, through, I think the grant was through Pew. And then we contracted out, or the commission did. I was part of the commission, but so when I say we, I meant us as a community. And the individual who did the analysis is Miguel Willis. He's still around, and I could get that contact information, but it was really great. He did a social network analysis and a community needs mapping, and it was really fantastic. And really helped us align together as a community and understand, once we had that information, we knew that lawyers weren't going to be the answer to address all of these unmet needs. And so where would we go next? It was great. Very helpful.
Ben.
Great. Thank you. And thank you, Nicole, for your presentation. Can you guys hear me? Okay, perfect. Thank you. My question, and I believe Alaska is a mandatory state bar, meaning all lawyers must be a member of it. My question is the Alaska State Bar involved in this at all, as far as regulating or working with with the Supreme Court or working with these volunteers?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Alaska Bar Association, our waiver was approved. So it required a rule change. And so our rules, they first go to the Alaska Bar Association Board of Governors and then up to the Supreme Court. And so there's a way that our Supreme Court could have bypassed the Bar Association, but they said, let's start with the Bar Association and see what they will say. And our bar association was really supportive. We made the case that we showed these gaps that were there, that there were these huge swaths. And, this is known to people within our state, right? There are these huge swaths and community areas where there simply aren't any lawyers. And, if we want to serve them, we really, need to expand our thinking about that. And so we put it out. So it went to the the Bar Association's Board of Governors first. They put it out for public comment among the Bar Association and others. We received really overwhelming support of it. There were a couple of comments from folks at the Bar Association, mostly just wanting more information about it. I wouldn't say there was hard opposition. Most people were just kind of curious, how is this going to work? And then the Bar Association Board of Governors voted on it. They unanimously supported the waiver, and then it went to the Supreme Court after that for final approval. The Bar Association will be involved. They continue to, so they need to approve our training and any candidates we put up for the waiver. The Bar Association will approve that.
Okay, and sorry, I don't want to steal too much of everybody's time, but so the bar does approve candidates. Is there a process involved with that, or how is that done? Do you know?
Yeah, so that's the process. Yeah, so again, we will put a candidate forward. Again, we're still developing the training, so we'll make use of the waiver. And so that's a little bit of a work in progress right now. But essentially, the Bar Association, we just will need to put forward, what's envisioned is that we put forward a candidate, we explain what the training they've received, why we think they're competent to practice within the scope that we've identified. And Alaska Legal Services is sort of the guarantor, right? They're practicing under our license. We provide malpractice insurance, and we are guaranteeing that, so we're the guarantor. It's a form of entity regulation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Kate?
Yeah, hi. Thank you for the presentation, and I appreciate the opportunity to sit in today. I'm a court consultant with the National Center for State Courts, so thank you for that. I have a question, Nicole, about the partnership you alluded to with the Alaska Pacific University. Can you talk a little bit more about, is that a certification program? Is it just, not just, but is it a like a training that's built into a course that already existed? What does that look like?
Yeah, so no, it's not built into a course that already existed. We worked with the distance learning professionals at the Alaska Native Health Consortium, and APU hosts sort of our training modules on their platforms. And so right now, people are not getting, there's not a certification program or a official credentialing program. However, over the course of the next year, we envision, we spent the last year as part of the NSF grant, really understanding what the community would need and how we could best support proliferation of this model. And so some folks were saying, we really heard from the community justice workers who were interested in it, that some of those folks may want to be credentialed. And so they may want to have a certification. And that so that they could show their employers, and maybe their employers would then, know that they had this training. And also we want to be clear to the community about what, who has authority to do what. We envision that there will be 3 different certification levels at this point for CJWs. So a CJW 1 would be sort of what the current practice is of folks, where they're performing simple legal procedures that don't overstep the unauthorized practice of law prohibitions within our state. And CJW2s might be a mix of that. So people who are maybe preparing forms and documents and giving some assistance, but not doing appear in court. In some circumstances, those may step up to, you might need a waiver in some of those circumstances under our laws. And then a CJW3 would probably always need the waiver. But so we're thinking of it in those terms. But we really are trying to do a low barrier model where we want to start from the most inclusive place as possible and say, anybody who is interested in doing this work, we want to see what supports and supervision are necessary to make that possible until the evidence suggests otherwise. Right now, a lot of the programs that are being stood up are really pulling standards out of thin air that aren't related in any way, that are not based in any evidence of what actually works to train and supervise folks. So we're taking the opposite position, and we want to go where we want the proof to, we want to start assuming that everybody could do this if they want to, as long as they're provided enough training and support. And then the issue is whether or not that training and support is scalable.
Thank you.
Stormy. Stormy, you're muted.
Can you hear me now? Oh, I was muted in 2 places. I apologize. Thank you so much for your presentation. It's really been very informative. I think I heard you correctly that I know the current workers are not actually practicing law, but you said that they are covered under your legal malpractice insurance?
Yes, well, I think.
Oh, and I was just wondering if you've had any discussions with your insurance carrier regarding as the community justice workers move more toward giving actual legal advice, and if they're also going to be covered?
So let me be clear, they are giving actual legal advice under our, there are different unauthorized practice of law rules in different states. Alaska's is very broad. So or not very broad, it's very narrow, right? So you would not run afoul of the unauthorized prohibitions, unauthorized practice of law prohibitions in our state unless you hold yourself out to be an attorney, and you're doing it for compensation and you're providing representation in a tribunal, right? So our CJWs are giving legal advice. I want to be clear about that, but it's very simple legal advice. They're not holding themselves out to be attorneys, and they aren't providing representation in a tribunal. I think in other jurisdictions, just the giving of legal advice does, by statute, is prohibited by the unauthorized practice of law. Okay, then back to the insurance question. Yes, our insurance providers are aware the CJW program. We report it to them, and actually, strangely, our malpractice insurance has gone down since, because it's really whatever, like, the risk analysis that they use is really based on how many attorneys you have on, like, your ratio of attorneys on staff to the number of cases you're providing. And anyway, so I mean, it's not a huge decrease. It's not really like worth it, but it turns out that yes, they're aware. We are doing the work, and it it's not problematic from their perspective.
Other questions? Well, I'll go ahead. Oh, Adrienne.
Hi, Nicole. I'm with the Public Defender Department here, and I'm just wondering if you had any conversations with your public defender agency about using a similar program for criminal representation.
Yeah, so we haven't really done that yet, although I can say a couple of things. One, we have a partnership with our public defenders, a holistic defense partnership. So we partner and provide sort of the civil legal aid services that help people stay out of jail or become justice involved. And so I think there's a lot of overlap, and we are using our community justice workers as part to support that project, because a lot of the work that helps stabilize families and keep people from being justice involved really falls nicely within the work that community justice workers do. So that's one way. The other thing I'll say is that, we have a lot of tribal nations here. And so they're, and who aren't, so we have had lots of conversations about how the community justice worker model will work, and the infrastructure that we're building to support those trainings envisions that the tribal system will be able to use that training system to train lay advocates that come out of the tribal system as well.
And Nicole, so you're the Alaska LSC, you are oversee this program, correct?
Correct.
And is the Community Justice Worker Center through you?
Yeah, it is. So, and we're just getting ready to launch it next week, as it turns out. So over the course of the last year, before we had one position, Sarah Carver oversaw as the director. We called her the Justice for All coordinator. But over the course of the last year, we were able to gather $8 million in support to start a community justice resource center that will help us expand and better support the workers. And so Sarah will be leading that up. It's attached to Alaska Legal Services and reports to our executive director, but it will have two co-directors of their own, one that supports the CJWs and one that builds partnerships. Also, as part of that, the Legal Services Corporation recently invested about $5 million in our community justice worker training program to help the community justice workers address disaster impacted areas. And as part of that project, we will be expanding to 4 additional states with Native American serving communities. DNA People's Legal Services will be part of that expansion. I know they have jurisdiction that runs into New Mexico as well. We are also working with Anishinaabe, Montana Legal Services, and I'm missing one. Oklahoma Indian Legal Services. But so we're already pushing the expansion into states in the lower 48. And we look forward to, seeing if we can, and we're really targeting areas that have limited infrastructure, like Alaska, where we might be able to share some of the create a joint infrastructure to support the work. So we're not all building our own wills, but finding, ways that we can lift all boats together.
And David, let me turn to you in 1 second. I'm just going to ask a few follow-up questions. And so Nicole, of course, very fascinated by your ability to raise $8 million to support the Community Justice Center. And so could you give us an idea of where those funds came from?
Yeah, and it was really surprising to me too, to be honest. I mean, I've been doing legal aid for my entire career, and it's raising funds is a challenging thing. It's really, I will say two things that have been very surprising about the community justice worker model: how easy recruitment has been for CJWs. People want to be involved in this. That recruitment has been going just by word of mouth and increasing exponentially, and also the funds coming in to support it. So once we were able to get a capital appropriation from our state legislators that was amazing. So about $500,000 there. There was a federal earmark, if we ever get a federal budget, that will support part of that money. About $5 million coming in from the Legal Services Corporation to support this work. And then the $1 million from the NSF grant. And then also, which I can say this now, but McKinsey Scott invested, we got an unsolicited donation from McKinsey Scott. So to invest in the program too. Also, there is a model in which our community partners want also to help expand it, because it's supporting and making the work of their current community helpers more impactful. And so they've been willing to invest in it too, so that we could expand the supervisors available to better support the work.
I'm sorry, just a few follow-up questions. So one, I believe your PowerPoint earlier noted you have one full-time staff position dedicated to CJWs at the Alaska LSC. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so what other costs do you bear at Alaska LSC? I'm trying to understand how much it costs to run the program.
Sure.
And I know there's through your Alaska LSC, and then now separately, kind of together, but kind of separately, you then have the center, the resource
right.
center.
So, and I think the center wasn't necessary. We hope to sort of model it and create a joint infrastructure, but really the costs of getting things started and going really related to the training modules, right? We needed to have a training modules, and we were really lucky. Our partners, the workforce development partners, gave a lot of in-kind in that, but each of the training modules cost about $40,000 each to develop the targeted training models. One of the things that we hope to do at Alaska Legal Services is carve out some of those training modules that are 90% of the law for low-income people is the same in most jurisdictions. It's the 10%. So if we can build training modules, invest in them collectively that address sort of the 90% where things are the same, and then allow people to make modifications locally, we think that we can, support that work. But so essentially the startup costs were the staff person, someone to do some initial recruitment, to get it going, and then the training modules, which were each about $40,000 a piece, and we got that from various grant sources along the way.
Thank you. David.
Good morning. In looking at what I think is the correct Alaska Supreme Court rule, you had an obligation to provide quarterly reports to the Alaska Supreme Court Board of Governors.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, would you be willing to share those reports with us? Not just so that we can pirate the forms, but we'd be interested in the data. Have you had any complaints? I know that was a part of the form.
So we haven't started reporting yet. Again, so the waiver just went into place in November of last year, and so now we're upskilling people who will make use of the waiver. But I'm happy to share when the information that we currently have is in my PowerPoint presentation about what folks are doing that do not require the waiver. And again, we've had 100% success rate as reported by the client community. There have been no complaints to date. And one thing to say in the SNAP benefits world, our community justice workers were able to draw down $5.5 million in benefits that otherwise would not have been distributed throughout our communities. And that was really important because we sort of were facing this crisis, really a humanitarian crisis within our community when our state stopped distributing SNAP benefits and stopped processing them. And so elders in remote communities and children were without food. And so our CJWs are really instrumental in helping get that fixed.
Thanks.
Yep.
Any other questions? Well, Nicole, this has been incredible. You obviously have done heroes work in you and your team putting this program together. I've actually seen you speak 2 other times at various conferences. I just never introduced myself, but I learn more every time I hear from you and your team. And to me, you've got one of the most incredible models in the country, and the low barrier is really stunningly successful, is what I'm hearing all the time from your talks, or the talks of you and your team, which but I cannot overstate how impressed I am by that, and that you took this route, and you've not seen any reason to need to narrow what you're doing into a more what I'll call a more structured certificate program or training program or something along those lines. And I think that's really impressive. But Nicole, because for those who may have gotten here a little late, while Nicole is, I think, currently for about 10 more seconds, the executive director of the Alaska Legal Services Corporation, she is soon to be transitioning over to Frontline Justice. She has recently been hired as the founding CEO of Frontline Justice, will remain working from Alaska. And Nicole, could you share with us a little bit about Frontline Justice?
Sure. Yeah, so Frontline Justice is a national organization that really hopes to create an enabling environment throughout the rest of the nation so that we can try different research-based models, evidence-led models that will allow for some justice innovation, particularly around community justice workers, and create environments throughout the nation for that to happen. And so we envision, again, we're in the startup phase of this, but really we envision one thing that we will do is sort of help clear pathways so that people can do this work, provide technical assistance to folks who are trying to stand things up, so that they understand how to do that, and also influence power brokers in the nation to maybe invest in this work, right? Because we think that this is the way we might actually to bring resources to the communities who need them, so that they might be able to do the work that's needed on a community-based level. And so that's our plan.
Well, we will be very excited to watch what's happening with Frontline Justice. And I think for me, one last question, and that is there any reason why we could not have some folks here, for example, some folks who work with the administrative office of the courts, take some of the training modules that you have? I'm assuming some of us, you let us take those just so we could see what's being offered.
Yeah, you can look at them. I can connect you with Sarah Carver. So we have to sign up through Alaska Pacific University for you to go through the actual module. But I think she can give you sort of a back end, like the behind the scenes one, which is not as public facing. So you can just like flip through them, but you wouldn't see exactly what the students or the trainees see. One thing I will also mention is we are expanding at Alaska Legal Services too, with the Community Justice Resource Center piece of it, to have apprenticeship programs, so that we would have CJWs as we try to upskill them so they're doing more complex legal work. They'll be apprenticing within ALSE offices as well. So we're, through paid apprenticeship programs.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other questions before we let Nicole go? This is really an amazing opportunity to have you with us, Nicole. Thank you so much for joining us today and helping us on our journey toward the path that we're going to be hopefully taking in New Mexico at some point.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for the invitation, and I am happy to be of assistance in any way that I can. So.
Judge, could I just clarify? Nicole, I was going to reach out to you. This is Twyla, with a couple of questions for some documents and stuff, etc. Is your email going to be working for a little bit, or do we need to get a different email to reach out to you?
I will give you my other one. My email should be working for another couple of weeks. But I will give you my new email too.
Thank you.
And I just put it in the chat.
Thank you very much.
All right, that's great. Well, if everyone else wants to hang out for just a few more minutes, but we'll let Nicole go. Thank you again, Nicole. It's been an honor and a pleasure to have you here, and we wish you success in your new adventure.
All right, well, thank you so much, and thanks for the invitation. I wish you all luck too.
Yeah, and don't be a stranger. Feel free to come to New Mexico anytime.
Oh my God, I would love that. I love New Mexico.